I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects to elders past and present. And I do this because I think the history of the land we're on is very important. It allows us to understand where we've come from and where the people around us have come from, and allows us to have a relationship with all the different peoples that have come over time. When Indigenous people go to each other's land and say that they acknowledge the country of the other, or they welcome somebody to their country, they also say that they're going to that land with purpose. They're coming to the land to meet, to discuss, and to make a difference. They're not just going to the land to say hello or to have a party. When you have the welcome, it's because this is a serious matter. Welcoming people to your land is a serious matter. And we want to be welcomed, and we want to acknowledge the people who are welcoming us in that situation. Tonight, we've got a very serious matter for all of the Jewish people around the world and all the Palestinian people around the world, which is the question of peace. We're having this sit-in, and I know it's a sort of funny thing to have a sit-in when we're all sitting in front of our computers, but we're not really in a position to come together the way we might otherwise like to do. And tomorrow in Israel, there is going to be a very big peace demonstration. There's going to be people gathering in Tel Aviv, and it's going to be the first peace activist movement in Israel since October 7th. And they've got some fantastic speakers who I would love to hear. Professor Yuval Noah Harari is there, Shannon Street with Ayala Inga Deshet and Safar Hatut, and Yael Deckelbaum, and various public figures and other people, all who sound incredibly interesting, Noor Darwish, all people that we know. And we can't even stream in because it's at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we are getting together with each other to share this occasion and to mark the peace. The people who are coming together are the two groups that we've been introduced to and been involved with in the past. Those two groups are Women Wage Peace, which is the Jewish women and the women of Israel, and Women of the Sun, who are based in Gaza. The Women of the Sun have, of course, not been able to operate as well during the war as they might have otherwise, because clearly there was no electricity for a period of time, let alone any other things. But nonetheless, some of the women from Women of the Sun have made an effort to remain in contact with the women of Women Wage Peace, from the Jewish women, from the Arab women, from the Catholic women, from the Christian women of Israel, to say that we still believe that peace is an important outcome, and that if we're going to have an outcome, we need to be partners together. So peace has got to be about partnership. We cannot unilaterally declare peace. Without us working with each other and working with the other, we can't achieve peace. But I thought that one of the most important things that we've been talking about recently is that if you are not a person who is grounded in your identity, you're going to find it very difficult to come to terms with the other, because you're going to be easily undermined. So I thought that I would start off by talking about tonight about peace in the Jewish tradition. And then we're going to hear from some other speakers about other aspects of this process. And as it's a sit-in, and you have no idea, of course, what really you're doing as a sit-in online, we're hopefully going to replicate a few of the things that you would do outside in a protest. But first, let me take you to Women Wage Peace. Who are Women Wage Peace, and what are they all about? So Women Wage Peace are the largest civil society organization in Israel. There are women from all walks of life. It's a volunteer organization. There are something like 50,000 members. It's quite incredible. If you go to an event, you'll meet people from all walks of life. And there are many, many people committing many hours to the task of organising this. Prior to October 7, women from Women Wage Peace met every weekend to have a protest relating to women wage peace. And they would go dressed appropriately and meet each other in a street corner all around the country, in street corners, to talk about peace and to keep up the idea that we could pressure government for peace. And 3 days before or 4 days before October 7, there was a peace demonstration in Israel, which I've mentioned to you before. And at that peace demonstration, there were, I'm very bad at numbers, so you can never rely on anything that I say when it comes to a number, but I think that someone told me there were 20,000 people, if that sounds right to you. And there was it was a meeting where there was the idea that people from different places around the world would also support this and sign a movement again towards working together for peace. And there was, at the end of the ceremony, there was a place where people sat down, people from Gaza, people from the West Bank, from all over Israel, came together, as I said, Jews, Muslims, Christians, whatever, and held on to each other in the belief that peace was possible. After October 7, of course, there was a big change. Partly there was a change because a lot of people turned out not to actually be concerned with peace, and that was a problem. There was a lot of sense of betrayal by some people. And also the person whose name still remains as the founder of Women Wage Peace, Vivian Silva, was murdered on the kibbutz that she lived in on October the 7th. It took a few days for her body to be found. It was in a very bad state of degeneration by the time it was found. And so everybody knew Vivian, and it was a very sad moment. But now everyone's decided it's time to come together again and to try and see if we can do something to work towards peace. And I just thought I would show you, Shoshi, if we can have that first video about Women Wage Peace, just a couple of minutes of seeing sort of the atmosphere and the feeling that there was just a few days before October 7th.
I just want to say, this is Jen speaking, that my friend Vered, who is in Women Wage Peace in Israel, she's one of the, she's sort of in the leadership group. She was here for a short while. She said she's got to go and visit her mum now. But yeah, so that was rather nice.
Oh, how wonderful. That's so nice. Is she still in Australia?
No, she was, I sent her the link. She came in from Israel for a few minutes then, but she didn't want me to introduce her.
That's okay, there. I'm here.
Oh, okay. Hi.
You're here. Very lovely to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too. I'm sorry that I can't join for the whole meeting. I didn't want to interfere.
Oh no, you're very welcome. You're very welcome to stay. Okay, have we got some sound, do we think?
Let me know. Can you hear it?
את מבינה בביטחון לאומי.
את תמימה, את לא מבינה.
מי את שתצליחי לשנות?
זה בלתי אפשרי.
אף פעם לא יהיה שלום.
אף פעם לא יהיה שלום.
אף פעם לא יהיה שלום.
אבל אני לא אוותר.
לא אשב עוד על הספסל האחורי.
זה בידיים שלי לסיים את מעגל האלימות האינסופי עבורי ועבור ילדיי.
כמו נשים אמיצות וחזקות לפניי.
קולי נוסק מעבר לגבולות.
זרועותיי פנויות לתמוך באחרים.
רגליי נושאות אותי בכל נתיב שאבחר.
אף מכשול בו אתקל בדרכי.
לא ירפא את ידיי.
אשמיע את קולי.
ביחד עם אזרחיות, מנהיגות ומובילות שינוי.
שימו קץ לאלימות, לכאב ולקורבן.
כי אנחנו הנשים,
אמהות,
בנות
וסבתות,
לא מוכנות עוד להקריב.
לא ננוח עד שנעמוד כולנו יחדיו.
חזקות יותר ביחד.
כשאומרים לי שאין תקווה, אני מסתכלת סביבי,
ואני יודעת שאני בדרך הנכונה.
כאישה אחת אני חזקה.
אך כשאני אלפי נשים,
אין דבר שיכול לעצור אותי.
לא נעצור עד שיחתם הסכם מדיני.
Thank you very much, Shosh. I just wanted to give you a sense of the feeling that there is in the organization between different peoples coming together. And so let me turn now to, if I can find it, to the question of peace in the Jewish tradition. I wanted to start with some words that you're probably familiar with that come from Bob Dylan. May God bless you and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung. May you stay forever young. Now, we know that Bob Dylan was not a particularly practicing Jew, but he was very good at demonstrations and sit-ins, and his songs would often be there, and very often his songs would have words in them that actually reflected very much the Jewish tradition. Listen to the words of the priestly blessing. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. There's a very strong feeling between those two pieces. And in every Jewish prayer, in almost every Jewish service, with the ending comes the idea of peace. So at the end of the daily prayers, we have a prayer for peace. The last line of the prayer that we say, the Kaddish, that we say when someone has died, the last line is peace. The last words of grace after meal are the words around shalom, peace. It's about life and loving. You cannot properly live without peace. You cannot thrive without inner peace. You cannot connect adequately to your Creator without a commitment to peace. Peace in Jewish liturgical tradition is not merely the absence of war or conflict. It's rather bringing together opposing forces and ideas, the harmonizing of diverse peoples or principles. The Jewish philosopher Joseph Albo said that conflict is at the heart of the human condition and peace is the force of fusion. It's what Dylan Thomas called the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. The Hebrew word for peace, shalom, is intimately related to the Hebrew word for wholeness, shelemut. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, suggested that shalom is the harmonious coexistence between otherwise conflicting individuals, tribes, and nations, each with a distinctive nature and unique contribution to the totality of mankind. Shalom, he says, is not about uniformity, but about integrated diversity. Judaism, Jonathan Sachs also says, has a dual concept of peace. the end of days peace envisaged by the prophets, and the modest version here and now peace articulated by sages in their concept of Darchei Shalom, a set of rules for friendly coexistence for those with whom you disagree. We need to ask the question, I think, about what we're talking about when we're talking about shalom and peace. What exactly is it we're praying for? What does peace mean? The word in English of peace comes from the Latin word pax, which means ceasefire, something that you might call a humanitarian pause. I think that's very interesting in the context of the discussion at the moment about having a ceasefire, having peace. What will bring peace? Is a ceasefire the same as peace? Shalom, on the other hand, comes from this word of completeness, this word shalemut, that refers to the permanent state of no more hatred. So when we're trying to establish what is peace, we need to actually understand this idea of shalom, that we want peace that is complete. Personally, I don't want a truce. I want things to change in an ongoing way. I want a response that will say, we can be friends and work together and live differently, have different styles, have different cultures, not believe what the other believes in, completely disagree with the other, but still live with them in a world of respect. So that it is important that when we talk about shalom in the Jewish tradition, it's almost always coupled with the word justice. So you need to try and work out what would be just in the situation to create peace. If there is no justice, there can be no peace. So justice is a condition of peace. And again, that's a complex idea that we need to try and unpack. While it's not part of the formal liturgy, there is a poem which has become a song, which is considered quite important in the Jewish tradition. It's the song of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who said, "The whole world is but a narrow bridge." His prayers were preserved as a collection published after his death, and they included a petition for peace. And so I thought it was appropriate that we should now take up the version by Deborah Silver, who's a British rabbi, who turned the song of Rabbi Nachman into words of peace, a peaceful song. Rabbi Nachman asked God to erase war and bloodshed from the world, and in its place draw down a great and glorious peace, and for the inhabitants of the earth to recognize that we have not come into the world for division and strife. Instead, the objective of our lives is peace. Shoshi, could we have the song, please?
כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד.
והעיקר, והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל.
Sorry, it's a very long one, so I'm going to cut it short there.
Thank you very much, Shashi. I didn't say at the beginning because of the mix-up with the filming, but I want to say now that on every occasion since the date of October 7, on every non-occasion, and every moment, the hostages have been close to my thoughts. And today is day 267. There are 120 hostages who've been in captivity for 267 days. We're having reports now and some tales told by some of the people who have been hostages and released. They've shown enormous courage in the face of their travails. And we can only hope that they continue to recover, as it's no doubt going to take them a long time to recover from their experience. And we need to bring the other 120 home now. I'm about to ask you a question, and I'm hoping that you'll just put answers in the chat, and then Shosh might go through and pick out some of them to share. I'm going to ask you the question, what do you think are the biggest obstacles for peace? And for me, it goes without saying that there can't be peace without the return of the hostages. But other people might feel differently, and you might feel there's something that's another sort of obstacle. So please, let's write in the chat what obstacles you think there are to the peace process, or lack of process. We're beginning to get some answers, and we might ask people to elaborate, or let's see what happens. Give you a minute to think. It's interesting what's coming in. I just give people a chance to write a bit more. I was originally going to say, what's the biggest obstacle for peace other than Netanyahu? Because I think that goes without saying. Of my friends, anyone who previously had supported Netanyahu prior to October 7 has changed their thoughts about the situation. But people might believe that he's the person who can do the job. So I can see a few people have said that. Shosh, do you want to tell us about some of these things, or ask people to elucidate?
Yeah, absolutely. I would really like to hear from Leanne for a second to talk about the leaders on both sides. What would you like to see in the leadership that you're not seeing?
I'd like to see leadership and a plan. I know that amongst the protest movement, in a lot of the peace building not-for-profits, amongst some younger people, younger Palestinians outside of Israel, there's definitely a desire for peace and a lot of work going on to think what that would look like, what the day after will look like. But at the moment, the leaders of Hamas don't want peace, and Netanyahu doesn't want peace with his partners either.
It does seem to feel like that, doesn't it? I want to invite Nikki to talk about her comment, if that's right, because I think it should complement Leanne's statements.
Thanks, Shosh. Shalom, everyone. I wrote a lack of space for a nuanced and civil dialogue, and I think that there are very few spaces now where we can actually talk to one another in a civil way and disagree respectfully, but also to recognise each other's pain. And there's a real flattening of the issue. So few spaces where the nuance is allowed to, to be examined or explored. Very polarized kind of discussions. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to ask Paula to comment because I think that her comment might add to this conversation about nuance.
Is that me, Paula, or someone else? Hello?
Yes, it's you, Paula. I think you're the
Okay.
only Paula in here.
Okay. I think that we've lost the nuance for several reasons. And the thing that shocked me in Melbourne, being in my 50s, is I've had 4 or 5 incidents of just clear anti-Semitism against me, just when they know that I'm Jewish and support Israel. It's like there's a flinch and like there's no, and I think part of that is not just miseducation of Gazans over decades, but the amount of misinformation and pure lies that's on the social media, which then inflames you to hatred, whether you're, wherever you are on the spectrum. So it's so much easier to be full of hatred and in those disparate avenues than it is to be cooperative and conciliatory and disrespectful. And without respect, I mean, that's one sign of the collapse of a civilization, when neighbours hate each other, number one. Number two, there's no need for us in Australia to be cruel to each other. It's not a dispute that's happening here. And if we can't be civil, what hope is there for Israel and Palestine? And finally, the miseducation of people is terrible. Like with the peace rally, if they put a headline the next day, hate is un-Australian, thousands rally for peace, and showed the thousands rallying for peace, it would have been a different reaction to, clash of thousands, which it wasn't. So, and I'm particularly concerned about the education of Gazans, because they are radicalised from childhood through the education of UNRWA. And UNRWA doesn't just educate in Gaza, they educate in Syria and Jordan and the West Bank. And it's quite scary when you look at their educational materials, which parallel those given to German children during the war. And it disturbs me because they get a poor education anyway. And I can't see a solution until the role of Hamas is acknowledged in the hardships of the Gazans. But I'm not as, I loved what you said. It was very beautiful, but I don't feel as, I always say shelter me in your peace when I'm praying, but I don't see a detente with the current recalcitrant leaders. One side wanting to stay in the tunnels until everyone's died, and the other side wanting to bluster, and I don't know what the change will be. I mean, do all women in Israel and Gaza riot?
Well, let's find out. I think that's part of the adventure of tonight.
Yeah, so
we're finding out. I am going to ask Debbie.
Sorry, Josh, I just wanted to say there that so many of these topics require a whole conversation. We're just going to be almost mentioning them now. If you want to be involved in organising things, or there are things that you particularly want to be involved in, or particularly you want to have happen, you need to also make sure that you let me know. Because there's room for everybody. There's room for all the help I can get. Everybody knows for anything I do, there's room for lots of space for everybody. And we do have planning to have a session where we'll go through some of the definitions of things, or what things are in the various bits of conversation that are going on.
I would like to add one more comment to the crowd, if that's all right. I'd love to hear from Debbie about the media and misinformation, and then I think we'll be moving on just to make sure our timing sticks. But I think it's really important that when looking at this from inside Israel and Gaza and the West Bank, as well as what is happening in the diaspora in the world, and I think Debbie's raised a really important point here. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from her.
Hi, everybody. Melinda, as always, good to see you. Thanks for doing such a wonderful job. So I think the media has a huge responsibility because they, not all of them, but the overwhelming majority of media prints and disseminates false information. And they do it so consistently and so repetitively that the average punter out there sucks it all up and has no idea that what they are ingesting is actually, if not fake news, then exaggerated news. I mean, for example, there are many examples one can give, but just sort of off the top of my head, what happened at the Al-Ili hospital fairly early on. It was Hamas claimed, Israel bombed the hospital and killed 500 people, I think they said. Well, it turned out, A, it wasn't us, B, it wasn't in the hospital, C, it was Hamas themselves, and D, it was in a car park. But prior to any of that being investigated, Hamas had disseminated this, the credulous media sucked it all up and disseminated it. And when it did come out that it wasn't us at all, it was too late. And it's the same with all the, the manufactured numbers of dead civilians in Gaza. Obviously, what's happening is awful, but there's a war going on. And, commentators have said, it's amazing. If something happens and, Hamas knows within a nanosecond that, 23 people or 41 or whatever it is have died. And the world sucks all this up and it's printed. And of course, the world hates us because all they ever see are pictures of dead babies and their figures are just made up. I mean, even the UN, who hates us, even the UN revised their numbers of dead a month or so ago, and they sort of halved it from roughly 15,000 women and children to about 7.5, if I'm not mistaken. I could go on, but they just, Hamas just pulls figures out of nowhere. Recently they dropped their own figures, I think, from 34 down to 24 because there were 10,000 who just couldn't be identified anywhere. There were nothing in the hospitals, nothing in ID records, there was nowhere. It thinks about the famine. Well, there is no famine. There might be shortages, but there's no famine. There's all of these things, but the credulous media suck it up, reprint it. And as I said, your average punter doesn't know any different. Your average punter isn't going to read whether it's any of the English language papers or look at COGAT or any of the things we might look at. So it's just, the media has a huge responsibility to play on all this, and I think they're really culpable. I absolutely do.
Yeah, it is a serious problem. We are very lucky to be blessed with someone who's very experienced in the peace process. So she's going to start coming in next. And so hopefully she'll be able to give us ideas. I'm going to hand back to Melinda now.
Before I introduce you to Robin, I just would like to recommend that you all do look what's in the chat because there's some interesting ideas and things that you should listen to or read from other participants. So I'd like now to welcome Dr. Professor Robin Burns. Robin is a peace educator, first and foremost, although she's also spent time in the Antarctic and in Namibia and other interesting places. Robin has a Master's of Public Health and a PhD on Comparative Education. She's worked on education and peace education in 8 countries, and she's done tertiary teaching for most of her career. She also spent 3 years in the Australasian Diplomatic Service, and 2 years overseas postings, 27 years as a lecturer senior lecturer in education at La Trobe, specialising in multiculturalism, multicultural development and peace education and women's health. She was the first female president of the ANZ Comparative and International Education Society, first female executive secretary of the International Peace Education Commission. In 1996, she co-authored a book called 3 Decades of Peace Education, and she's working now on another book on peace education. She's the author, of course, of many academic publications, and you can look her up and find all of her things to read. At a later stage, you'll find them very interesting. And Robin is my in-house expert when it comes to peace education. So I'd like to welcome you, Robin, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
Lindy, thank you very much indeed for that overwhelming introduction. I think it's a privilege as a non-Jew particularly to be with you at this peace sit-in tonight. And I'm just going to ask you to excuse me for using detailed notes, because I don't want to have a Biden moment. As I began to prepare some words to share with you, I was taken back to the 1980s, when peace movements became actively involved in protesting against the proliferation of nuclear weapons and called there for disarmament as their main objective. On any scale, the reality and potential use of nuclear weapons is an almost unimaginable threat. And as conflict and violence rise and fall around the world, so too does the fear of their use. We certainly need to keep that in mind as we consider de-escalation and war. However, I'd like to focus first on what most would describe as the alternative to war and violent conflict, namely peace. I listened with great interest to Lindy's account of peace in the Jewish tradition. I found many echoes in my own tradition and, in fact, in what I've found in movements around the world. I'll also go on briefly, alas briefly, to consider some approaches to peace building, and then, as we are a women's group, to talk about the peace work of some notable women's organisations, again, of which some you are well aware of and have been shown tonight. So what is peace? Most people would probably first answer by saying it's the absence of war. But can't it be more than that? By considering violence as a major feature of war and of other forms of conflict, resolving it should certainly lead to a state of living that we can call peace. However, when we realise that violence has many forms, it's a short step to see that peace is surely more than the absence of war. If war and other forms of organised physical violence between and within nations constitute negative peace, then what might positive peace look like? I go back to the Norwegian researcher, the late Johan Galtung, who proposed the concept of structural violence. It goes beyond the obvious forms of violence and conflict and includes racism, inequality of resources and access to education, healthcare, employment and cultural expression, and must therefore be addressed in order to attain social justice, a precondition, I believe, for positive peace. Peace educators have written, positive peace is when social justice has replaced structural violence. In contrast to negative peace, positive peace is not limited to the idea of getting rid of something. It includes establishing something that is missing. Thus, addressing those issues that constitute structural violence is necessary in order to move to social justice and positive peace. With such a large field covered in the concept of positive peace, what might peace building look like? Well, the starting point is obviously within the context in which peace is lacking, threatened. So there's no general answer to that. I'll never forget being at a conference in the mid-1980s when a colleague asked, what would peace look like in a liberation movement? We'd been discussing how to include learning about peace in the curricula of schools and other educational institutions, at a time when there were still active liberation struggles against colonialism, especially in Africa. And I don't think we found a satisfactory answer. I wonder if we can now. Liberation was achieved through a combination of struggles, both violent and non-violent, diplomacy, politics, and perhaps underlying them cultural change in the assessment of the issues involved and in the minds of those perpetuating them. Peace building needs to start with an analysis of the situation and a search for the injustices that are provoking the violence. There is now a worldwide movement of people advocating peace education as an important step in the long-term peace-building process. We also recognise that there can be structural violence within formal education itself. Research has suggested that education can entrench intolerance, create or perpetuate inequalities, and intensify social tensions that can lead to civil conflict and violence. It's also a key determinant of the income, influence and power that such inequalities in access to education can lead to. Other inequalities including income, employment, nutrition and health, as well as political position. And these can all be important sources of conflict. So it is the type of education and not just the fact of it that is critical as a peace-building tool. A challenge for formal education is to what extent, if at all, peace education can go beyond simply the transmission of knowledge and engage in participatory action. There are two main issues here. What should the content of peace education be, including what values it should seek to transmit, and how is it best delivered? An underlying concept that's gained traction recently is the concept of transformative agency. And it's being used in education for peace, human rights and social justice. It suggests that such education will involve action to promote positive peace. Clearly, there is less controversy over the inclusion of action in non-formal educational settings. And I'm sure there have been the odd occasion where there's been criticism, for example, of school children participating in peaceful demonstrations. The example is still being used in this field of the work of the Brazilian, the late Paulo Freire, who designated education as cultural action, action for freedom, starting with the position of the learner, not as a teacher. Education is to raise learners' critical consciousness and equip them with the knowledge, skills, and networks to act for positive social change. Freire's approach has been effectively used in adult literacy education and other informal programs. It's a tool for positive peace building and also an example of the different approaches to the content, knowledge, and ideology of the social and political change that lead to different forms of peace education. And like all education, of course, outcomes are slow. So what else can be done to promote peace building? There are many possibilities. What you're doing tonight, a peaceful sitting as a form of protest to make your position known widely, is one that has been important. Just think back to the ending of the Vietnam War. Working as facilitators side by side with the oppressed to enable them to voice their concerns and the actions they want from others is something the Quakers, or the Society of Friends, are using in a variety of situations, particularly with minority groups. Do look them up on the web. The South African Truth and Reconciliation processes, and those we are slowly moving towards here for First Nations people, are further useful examples. There is a long-standing example in Israel with the Ner Shalom village, established in 1970 to bring justice, peace and equality to all living in the state of Israel. And there are other relevant and related examples. I'd like to move on now. We could spend many hours discussing peace building for a start, but I'd like to move on now as you are women seeking peace by introducing some peace building by women over the decades. And this will be my last contribution tonight. Some decades ago, we talked about women as essential peacemakers. They have fathers, husbands, partners, sons who are killed in wars. Women are now too, of course. Dipping into history quickly tells us that that is only part of the story. Think of the women who scornfully gave white feathers to those not enrolled and those who were resistors in the First World War, or the Amazons, in fact, way back historically. But when we begin to analyse those factors that support war and violent conflict, we can see that war both feeds and is fed by a militarised culture. And that culture is essentially dominated in values and attitudes that support male dominance over women. Recent research has even shown that the topics examined by male and female peace and international relations researchers differ, especially investigations of security, and females have often been underrepresented in those research fields. So it is in the field of peace action that I think women's efforts stand out. In 1915, during the First World War, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom was formed. And one of its early achievements was to send representatives to the post-war conference tables. That took intensive lobbying and political action for that to take place. Today, WILP's vision is for a world of permanent peace built on feminist foundations of freedom, justice, non-violence, human rights and equality for all, where people, the planet and all its inhabitants coexist and flourish in harmony. Pretty big. The goals are reframing the concepts of security from violence and militarism to systems and structures that offer true peace and security, addressing the root causes of conflict through peaceful and gender-responsive means, replacing systems of oppression and building a powerful, inclusive and interactional feminist movement that connects peace activists and other social justice movements on a global level. Wow. Their action areas are challenging systems and structures of oppression, strengthening feminist peace action, and promoting inclusive and peaceful solutions to conflict. I think another nice example was formed at Green Common in England, beside the Air Force base that held US cruise missiles. It began in September 1981 and was formally dissolved only in 2000, when protesters achieved the opening there of a memorial for the action. I had to protest to get that memorial sited there. They realised that holding protest marches, however, was not enough, and so they established a camp outside the base. Their first action was when 30 women chained themselves to the perimeter fence. Next, they held a blockade of the entrance, where 250 women participated. A month later, in April 1983, 70,000 protesters formed a human chain from Greenham to Aldermaston, and the media attention that action received inspired peace camps across all of Europe. Already in 1982, there were 2 European women's peace marches, from Copenhagen to Moscow and Copenhagen to Paris, and I took part in the latter. There was an inspiring exhibition and series of discussions amongst women in Paris for several days after the march, which arrived and was welcomed through the Arc de Triomphe, which I think is interesting symbolism. The Greenham campers were evicted regularly but continued to return until finally the last missiles left the base in 1994. I could also cite the Save Our Sons movement here in Australia over conscription for the Vietnam War, and the human rights organisation formed in 1977, especially to draw attention to the victims of the brutal and militaristic regime in Argentina, the Madres de Plaza de Mayo. I've said enough. This is very general, and you are dealing with specificities. So in conclusion, I have to admit, peace building in earnest can really only begin once conflict has ceased, though actions such as the above contribute towards it by opposing the violence involved in negative peace. Your presence this evening, I believe, is evidence of the will to be part of both vital processes.
Thank you very much, Robin. That was fabulous. It was so interesting to think about the relationship between peace building and peace education and the work that we are doing now and what we're going to have to do as we move forward. I just want to add one thing in terms of international developments, which is that I need to mention yet again Security Council Resolution 1325 that was passed in the year 2000. It dealt with conflict and sexual violence in the context of conflict. And although that wasn't the main purpose of 1325, it's very important that so many countries have signed on, including Israel, to 1325. The other things that 1325 says is that women need to be involved in participation in the peace process, in protection and protective actions that might be taken related to the peace process, prevention of war, and relief and recovery of war, that where women are involved, there is a different outcome likely to occur. And that's consistent with the history that Robin has just shared with us this evening. We actually have, sit-ins go for indeterminate amounts of time, and although we're at the hour, we actually have a few other things on our agenda. So if you want to bear with us, that would be great. I want to introduce Amanda Gordon, who's just going to speak to you for a few minutes. Amanda is a clinical psychologist. She recently became an AM. I can't remember what it stands for. It's something very important. As a result of her work in the field of psychology and in multi-faith work and multicultural work. I hope that's correct. She was president of the Australian Psychological Society. She's been very involved with the International Psychological Society. She's been involved in Jewish activism since she was about 10 and has been involved in the Jewish Board of Deputies and the ECAJ, but she's also been on things like the Reconciliation Council and worked with Indigenous people. So other than the fact that she's my sister, she's a very valuable person to have here altogether. Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you. You called me Mandy, so I'll have to call you Lindy. Hello. Thank you so much, Lindy. Melinda, for inviting me to speak here from Gadigal land tonight. It's a delight to be here and to be involved with you. As Melinda, I was in Israel on October the 4th and then continuing past October the 7th last year, marching with Women Wage Peace and praying for and believing the hype at the time. I'm not as convinced that we have a partner as some of us remain. I think it was very disheartening to find that women who came from the kibbutzim in the Gaza envelope who were the peace activists were as vulnerable as everyone else. It didn't matter whether we were warlike or peaceful. But I wanted to talk as a psychologist about something that we talked about in shul yesterday. So I go to synagogue, and for those of you who do, the Torah portion yesterday was Shalach, and that's when God sent the spies into the land of Israel. So there were princes of the land, one prince from each tribe sent to scout out the land to see what it was like. And it seems that was to, in fact, satisfy the people who were getting anxious. So Moses chose the prince from each tribe, and they're named. He selected Caleb as one of the princes, Yehoshua, who he renamed. So he gave him the strength of God in his name, Yehoshua. They went to the land, and Caleb alone went to Hebron, to Machpelah, to the graves of our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and while the other spies did not. And they came back, and the question was, how were some people, 2 spies, able to see the world as it was and tend to be terrified, tend to not be able to stand up for who they were, to suggest that we could be winners, we could survive? And we're thinking about the problem when we go according to title. So I just received a title. I even put it on my identification on the Zoom tonight, but it's irrelevant because it could make me a bit complacent, make me feel like I'd done enough, make me feel that I was okay, but also mean that I'm less likely to take a risk. I don't want to take a risk because I have a reputation. I have a good reputation and I don't want to lose it. I'm an important person and I don't want to lose my reputation. So it was interesting that most of those princes found that they would just say, we won't take a risk, we'll take the easy way, we'll say that it's too hard and we just won't do it. We won't grow into the challenge that the land of Israel might present to us. Whereas Caleb got strength from his ancestors, from knowing who he was, from visiting those ancestors and feeling tall and proud that he was a Jewish man, that he was from the children of Israel. Yehoshua got his pride from being ordained, if you like, by Moses and being reminded that he was a man of God. And those two who didn't worry about their reputations because they knew where they came from and who they were able to come back and argue with the other spies. The relevance of this story for this evening, because I'm not here to give a Dvar Torah in exactly, but it really resonated with me, was when the spies came back, the 10 spies, they said, we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we were in theirs. They thought, because they felt badly of themselves, that they felt small, that they felt unable to respond to the giants, that the giants would see them that way. And yet we see from the Haftorah, in fact, that the people in the tribes who were living in Israel were actually frightened of the children of Israel and were waiting, terrified that they were going to approach. What we learn is that if you don't believe in yourself, you are never going to be able to stand up to your enemy. You're never going to be able to stand up and be truly who you are. And what we are doing by standing together for peace and knowing who we are, that we are standing for a righteous thing, such as a return of the hostages, the morality of living a life of social justice. And thank you, Robin, so much for the words that you actually talked about, because that has been, I believe, my life work and the work of so many people sitting here today is to create a world where there is social justice, where there is equality of resources, where there is an opportunity for all. And that's what the founding fathers of the modern state of Israel also prayed for and hoped for, that it would be a place that was available for all people to live in peace, no matter religion, no matter gender, no matter observance, and because of it, no matter race. So when we stand up for who we are and know who we are, then we are going to be able to wage real peace and not merely the absence of war. I'm proud to have been part of Psychologists for the Prevention of War. I think, in fact, more relevant would be Psychologists for the Forging of Peace, having listened to Robin. And I think the idea of positive peace rather than the absence of war is what I'm sitting here for this evening. Thank you, Melinda, for the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I think the theme that's run through this evening is this a theme about standing up for what you believe in and knowing enough about yourself to know what you believe in. Because if you don't know enough about yourself, then you're going to be insecure in these beliefs. You're going to be less sure about saying, I'm okay. And if you're standing up to anti-Semitism, this is a very big issue. A lot of people become more frightened or are prepared to buy what the other people say about us. There's a book that came out last year by Ben Freeman called Jewish Pride. And Ben wrote about the LGBT movement and said the Jewish community should take a leaf out of their book. What they did was they started off by making people, changing the way gay people saw themselves. They saw themselves as being in the closet. And now they've got pride about who they are. And he's saying he sees Jews and his Jewish aspect of his life so much like being in the closet, that we're scared about who we are. We're not got enough knowledge about our own background, don't know enough about things to feel confident to say that something else is wrong that's going on. So I think that's very important, that if we can. Sorry, there's something just came up on my screen and I have no idea if it's relevant to anything. So Jewish pride is a very good idea, that we should be proud in who we are. We should have a build, and the education system should teach us. Also, I would have thought to do with things to do with resilience and to do with self-confidence, to have children who are critical and self-confident and respectful would be a very good sort of combination. What I would like to do is, I did ask people to bring a candle, and if you haven't already lit your candle, I'd like you to light your candle. There's not going to say any sort of prayer or anything. I was going to read a prayer, but I'll send it round to you afterwards, because I think that it's a prayer written by a Palestinian woman and a Jewish woman. But it's a sit-in, so at a sit-ins we have to have songs. So we're going to light our candles, maybe turn your light off and have a bit of atmosphere, and we'll just go out with a few songs that are relevant to sit-ins and to us. So I am using one of a set of many sets of Shabbos candles, but you might have a different candle with you, one that has got some aroma. Shosh, would you like to move us on to some songs? Okay, before we start this one, I just need to say something about it. This song, oh no, maybe you'll be able to understand everything just by it being played, Shosh, as you've started it. It's a very Christian song. That song was chosen because it was actually sung by people all around the world. The parents and families of the hostages chose the song, and they worked with Kul Olam, and a number of people here were performed on that video. There was people taken in Melbourne and in Sydney, and I have to tell you, it was a great unifying experience to be part of it. It's interesting, though, that a Madonna song, which she says is a particularly Christian song, when you hear what she says about it, is the one that was chosen, but it felt quite beautiful singing it.
Would you like, what would you like, Emma? Do you want to go straight to Hallelujah, or you?
I think we better go straight to Hallelujah. I think everybody's tired. So this last song was performed at the end of the march that you saw. In 2016, there was a march from the Jordan River to the President's house in Jerusalem, and it was a stage set up, and this was performed there, and it's, I was there, and it's one of my favorite songs of all time, so it's being inflicted on you.
Well, I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, and the major lift. The buffalo call is calling hallelujah. رحمتني ورزقتني دوما يا أمي كنت معي. الأرض ضاقت والسماء، قلبي ما عرف الضياء، والدمع بدا يبكي يا أمي يا שמעתי שדוד הנים הכות פלאים לאלוהים, ושאתה שונא תווים ידוע. הקוד עגום היסטורי מינו נופל מג'ור ממריא, ומלך ממושך
I trust you understand why that's my favorite song. Well, this brings the evening to an end. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you all for your incredible work that you're doing to build a strong people and to work towards peace. Thank you from all of us, and we'll see you again soon.